Good afternoon. Welcome to Recovering Perfectionist Mama, Grace in Progress. My name is Buffy. If you are a new viewer, welcome. Happy to have you. If you're a returning viewer, also welcome. Happy to have you. I'm a women's lifestyle creator on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, covering topics that concern women. Today, we're talking about relational trauma and inner work, why healing isn't linear. If you've ever felt like you were doing the work, reading the books, going to therapy, praying, reflecting, and yet still found yourself reacting in ways that surprised you, this episode is for you. Today, I want to talk about relational trauma, emotional neglect, and inner work, and why healing so often feels non-linear, confusing, and even discouraging, like it's not happening quickly enough, especially for women who are trying very hard to do things well. This isn't a checklist episode. It's an understanding episode. I understand what you're going through, and I want to offer you and your heart some salve, because I know that it can be difficult. I know it can be overwhelming. I know it can be frustrating to feel like you're not seeing changes as quickly as you'd like. And oftentimes you're wondering if you can actually confide in others around you. Maybe there's some shame there. Maybe there's some just anxiety over what people might think. But ultimately, I think that everyone has a little bit of trauma sometimes. And I think that the people that are there to support you would be there to support you and offer you a helping hand, because maybe they've experienced that themselves or know someone that has. What relational trauma actually is. When people hear the word trauma, they often think of one big event, something dramatic or something obvious. But relational trauma isn't about one moment, it's about patterns. Relational trauma happens in relationships, especially in early relationships, where safety, responsiveness, or emotional attunement was inconsistent or missing. And that's not your fault. Nothing terrible had to happen. Sometimes what leaves the deepest mark is what wasn't noticed, what wasn't named, what wasn't responded to. And this is where emotional neglect comes in. Emotional neglect, the trauma that doesn't look like trauma. Emotional neglect isn't abuse, it's absence. It's growing up in an environment where your emotions weren't mirrored. They weren't validated. They weren't noticed. It almost seemed like maybe you were bothering someone or you needed to take care of it on your own. Distress wasn't explored. Sensitivity was minimized or even caused frustration on the part of a caregiver. Or you learned very early to be easy, strong, or self-sufficient. Many women say, nothing bad happened, so why do I feel this way? The question alone tells us something important. Emotional neglect teaches children, I need to manage myself. My needs are inconvenient. I should know what to do without help. Those lessons don't disappear in adulthood. They turn into hyper-independence, perfectionism, chronic guilt, and emotional overfunctioning, especially in motherhood. Why motherhood reactivates relational wounds. Motherhood has a way of surfacing things that we didn't know were still tender. Because suddenly, someone depends on you emotionally. Big feelings show up daily. There's no doing it right every time. If you grew up without emotional attunement, motherhood can feel overwhelming. Not because you're doing it wrong, but because it asks for something you were never shown how to receive. This is often when women realize, I understand my patterns, but I still feel them. And that's where the inner work comes in. Inner work, what it is and what it's not. Inner work isn't about going backward. It's about integrating. Inner child work at its core is simply acknowledging parts of you that learned early, offering them safety now, or reparentification if you prefer that, instead of shaming them for still being there. For women shaped by emotional neglect, inner work can feel awkward, indulgent, and even silly. That resistance is part of the work because emotional neglect taught you needing care is unnecessary. Why healing isn't linear and never was. Here's the truth that brings the most relief. Healing isn't linear because relationships aren't linear. You don't heal once and never get triggered again. You heal in layers. Awareness, compassion, regulation, repair. Sometimes you'll feel grounded for months, and then one interaction unravels you. That doesn't mean you're failing. It means something deeper is surfacing when you're ready. Healing often looks like revisiting themes, responding differently over time, shortening recovery windows, increasing your self-trust, not perfection. Perfection is never required. Just keep moving the needle a little at a time and you'll get there. Failed family relationships don't mean it's bad family. Many women hesitate to explore relational trauma because they don't want to villainize their parents or their families. But relational trauma isn't about assigning blame. It's about understanding impact, the impact it had on you. You can talk about families that loved but lacked skills, because sometimes when we know better, we do better. And sometimes people don't have the resources to be able to do that. And that's not saying that, that they're bad people or that they did wrong. Maybe they just didn't know. Maybe their parents didn't teach them. That sometimes things pass as a generational thing. Parents who were overwhelmed, traumatized, or emotionally limited. Good intentions versus emotional attunement. How unmet needs can coexist with love. This disarms defensiveness and invites reflection instead of shutdown. And why emotional neglect creates confusion, not just pain. Emotional neglect doesn't just cause pain, it causes confusion. Sometimes people doubt their own memories. Or maybe they're all or nothing thinkers and wonder, how can someone be both bad and good at the same time? How can I have moments where this individual wasn't the best to me, but I still miss them? Because they did good things for me. They helped me. They were there when other people were not there. But yet I feel guilty because I miss them. And I thought good of them for the most part, even though, they did some things that weren't good. Hear this, and I needed to learn this too. People are very rarely all good or all bad. That was my all or nothing thinking tripping me up because I had to be an absolutist there. So why do people minimize their experiences? Because they don't want to deal with the fact that maybe their childhood was less than ideal, especially if they have friends who've had an ideal childhood and they want to have that too. And they want to believe that and they want to block out negative thoughts. There's a lot of people who just block things out because it's easier to deal with than to actually acknowledge and go through the pain and experience it again. Why relationships feel simultaneously important and exhausting. Relationships are important, that's true, but they can feel exhausting when you're not on the receiving end of good things, when you're constantly enmeshed in drama and scapegoating and projection and being blamed and shamed and just made to feel like it was all your fault. And I know from my previous video that a lot of people have felt that way. They felt scapegoated. They felt blamed for things that they had nothing to do with. And ultimately, if you have trouble trying to explain your situation or explain who you are or explain anything that happened in your childhood and you struggle with that, that is completely normal. Because it's not only can it be maybe cause you shame or embarrassment or just sadness and fear and overwhelm and you just want to smooth everything over. That is a realistic feeling. Your feelings are valid. and you didn't do anything wrong. And so it has to be hard to feel shame for something that you had no place in. And know that I understand. And I think at times we all kind of struggle with some of the things that happen to us. And we just have to kind of do our best to try to get better and get better each day that we can. The relationship between attachment, faith, and trust. Let's talk about early relational patterns shape how people relate to God, authority, and trust. I think that parents have a very, very strong responsibility, especially when it comes to raising children. I have 5 children of my own, and I am very well aware of the things that need to be done to keep them nurtured, to keep them confident, to keep them encouraged. And in our family, we do pray. We do work on trust. We do work on trying to build strong relationships within our families, because families are important. And we do take our kids to church, and we do those things. Not to say that we're perfect, because we're not. No one's perfect. So, but ultimately, I think that sometimes parents kind of bleed on their kids sometimes, just because maybe they've experienced trauma that they've pushed and they've shoved and they've stuffed down. And that ends up becoming kind of a generational thing that future generations have to deal with. I know that I've been fortunate enough to be able to break some generational curses from my family line. And it hasn't been easy, but I try my best, and I try to encourage my kids to do what they can do. So it's very important that those formative years, and some of us didn't have that. Maybe we had trauma in our formative years, which kind of causes some distrust, causes some pain. And you think about the book, The Body Keeps the Score. I mean, we may have pushed it as far away out of our mind as we can, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist somewhere in our body. And our body remembers things that we don't remember. And also, some people continue to struggle many years later with surrendering or with being safe, because there has been a violation of some kind, or there has been relational trauma that they've not been able to shake. And that can, be a number of things that manifest itself there. But that does not make you weak. Potentially, if you're open to it, maybe seek out the help of a counselor or something, to be able to have someone you can actually talk to and trust, and can honor your feelings and help you, especially if you're having trouble kind of overcoming this, which is definitely normal. Why telling someone who has experienced trauma and generational trauma and all that to just trust can feel threatening? Because ultimately, when you've had your trust betrayed in whatever way, just trusting is a big ask. And some people are like, well, you just need to trust God. You just need to trust, the people around you. You just need to stop overthinking, stop dramatizing, stop doing the perfectionism, stop doing all your coping mechanisms, because they're really not working for you, And so ultimately, the person's like, well, I really have not been able to trust a lot, So you're telling this person to do something that they've had. I mean, you don't know their full experience, And so I try to never judge people, but I do like to offer encouragement. And so I totally get it. So why healing feels like loss before it feels like freedom. Healing relational trauma often feels like grief before it feels like relief, because you realize that is a part of you. That is a part that you've held for so long and that you've kept safe and you've internalized. And now you are getting rid of something that you know exists. And eventually, that inside you will eventually start to feel less and less. Because ultimately, it's not just about what you experienced. It's about what you carried. It's about what you didn't receive. It's about grieving the family you wish you had, grieving who you had to become too early, maybe hyper independent, hyper vigilant, protective of yourself, taking care of your siblings, grieving missed safety, thinking what your life might have been like if you had been safe, if you had been protected. Why people feel worse before they feel better? Because all of that seems to kind of pile on. And there are moments when you're by yourself, maybe late at night before you go to finally fall asleep, that you're thinking about all the things that you would have liked to have changed or you would have liked to have been better. And ultimately, yes, there is some emotional turbulence that people don't talk about, that people keep hidden. But you know that. If you've survived the storms and the relational trauma and the hurt and the pain, then you know that emotions can work against you sometimes. You know that it's painful. You know that it's hard. And you've put in the work and you're putting in the work now. You got this. You really do. I mean, it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in a straight line. But ultimately, with your determination and with your drive to do what you want to do and get past this, you can do that. I have faith in you. What safety actually means and why it is so misunderstood. Safety does not equal comfort. Safety does not equal control. I know a lot of us have become huge control freaks. I know I have for myself. Safety does equal predictability, responsiveness, and repair. Many adults seek safety through perfectionism, and I did that for many, many years, hence why my username is Recovering Perfectionist Mama, because I felt that if I could be perfect, then I wouldn't run afoul of anyone. And that was my coping mechanism. And some of my tactics were very ill-advised and were perfectionism at its core that I was never going to achieve. No one is ever going to achieve perfectionism, no matter how hard they try, how good of a person they want to be. I just wanted to avoid conflict. I wanted people to like me. I wanted to help others and love on others. And I didn't want to experience emotional pain and be hurt. I think many of you fall into that same boat. And also, we also seek safety through others, right? And sometimes those people disappoint us because they don't have the intentions that we have. They don't have the heart that we have, unfortunately. And we think they do, and we put our trust in others who just can't handle that trust. And then we seek safety through others through over-responsibility. We want to take care of others. We want to keep others from experiencing the things that we experienced. I know that when I had children, my view completely changed. And I literally wanted to protect my children with everything that I could, because I didn't want them to experience the things that I experienced. And I know that a lot of you can relate to that. So ultimately, coping is what we do to protect ourselves. It is an intelligence. It is a self-protective mechanism. Rather than blaming someone for being flawed. So, in closing, I want to say to you, if you're listening right now and realizing this explains so much and I still feel tired, I want you to know from the bottom of my heart, you're not behind. You're not broken. You're responding intelligently to what you learned early. Relational trauma heals in relationship, including the relationship you now have with yourself. And that takes time. If this resonated with you, you're not alone. And you don't need to fix anything today. Just noticing is already part of the work. Feel free to leave a comment if you like, or to request further topics that you might be interested in. I'm here for you. I'm listening. And I know that you can do it. And I know that you're already strong because you're watching right now. Keep on shining. Keep on doing what you need to do. You got this. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye. Hope you'll come back and see us again soon. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.